Hi everyone. Thanks, Jackie. So yeah, at the moment I work for the Times and Sunday Times, and I'll sort of get to that because I think that I'm lucky enough to be doing some incredibly exciting work at the moment. But I wanted to sort of tell you about how I got there, and a large part of this is going to be, as Jackie mentioned, is going to be about wannabe hacks. And not just because it happens in this instance that wannabe hacks it was related to journalism and it's played a large part in sort of my career progression, but because of all the aspects and the skills and the opportunities that wannabe hacks exemplifies, it's a really great reminder that there's a lot of opportunity out there for people. So just a couple of things is worth noting before I sort of get into sort of how wannabe hacks came about. The first is today, sort of the theme is about shifting landscapes. And I thought it's worth mentioning that the 3 jobs that I've held since I graduated in 2010 didn't exist 5 years ago. And there's been a lot of talk about sort of how you go about getting a job and how career paths develop. And one of the things I found absolutely fascinating is I couldn't have told you 3 years ago that I wanted the job I do now, but I love it. And you'll sort of find, because the industry is changing so quickly and because technology has such an impact on the way we communicate with each other, that your opportunities by the time you're graduating or taking on apprenticeships or trainee schemes are going to change massively. So be flexible and be reactive and be prepared to take opportunities that you didn't think you wanted. The second thing is you don't need permission anymore. It used to be that if you wanted to be a journalist and if you wanted to broadcast or to talk to people, you needed somebody else to publish you. So you needed a newspaper or a radio station or a television station. And that's just simply not true anymore, as wannabe hacks demonstrates. It doesn't mean that you can throw out the values of journalism. It doesn't mean that you can publish whatever you want. You have to be stringent. You have to stand stories up. You have to take the time to make sure you're doing your research. And you have to think very much about who your audience is and what your readers want. But no longer do you need to wait for somebody else. And I think that's a very important lesson to learn. I was chatting with Jamie earlier, and he was saying when they get job applications, the first thing they do is Google you. I'm sure you've heard that a lot, but it's true. And if you haven't shown yourself to be proactive and to take the opportunities that are there for you for free, just hard work, then you're wasting precious time. So Wannabe Hacks is 3.5 years old now. It has 21 volunteers involved. That includes the 5 people that helped found it. There's this idea coming out of sort of Silicon Valley and all the startups that the way that they get started becomes romanticized. You sort of hear about the way Facebook started. They made a film about it. The way Twitter gets started, and it's called the founder's myth because they like to leave out sort of the dirty details of who screwed who over and who stabbed each other in the back. We're sort of really lucky in the way that hacks came about. It's not a business. It doesn't make any money. We make some, but we put it back into sort of the project as a whole. And all of the people, so I work with one person, Ben Whitelaw. He's the head of community development at the Times, so he's one of the founders as well, and I was at university with him. And I'm still very good friends with the 3 other founders who all work. So Alice is an entertainment writer for The Telegraph, Tom is a sports sub for the Daily Mail, and Matt is a culture editor for The Guardian. It's had a really sort of big impact on our careers. So the reason we started Wannabe Hacks was when we graduated sort of 3.5 years ago, the advice that was out there in terms of sort of how you go about getting a career wasn't very good. In fact, it was still sort of mainly coming from people like Kelvin Mackenzie, who you may not even know, as sort of ex-editor of the Sun. And he was just sort of spouting very old sort of world views on how you go about getting started and where the opportunities were. And we'd been looking for a project, sort of Matt, Tom and Ben, I was all on the student paper with, and we really enjoyed working together. Matt was freelancing, and Ben and Tom were starting the newspaper masters at City University. And Tom was walking the dog one day, and he actually sort of phoned me up, and he went, "I've got it. What we should do is talk or write about the experiences we're about to go through over the next year. You're interning, I'm doing a master's, Matt's freelancing. There's a lot of different experience going on here." We also had a 5th member, a guy called Ned Murray. This is sort of make a point of not romanticising the thing. So Ned he was on the investigative masters at City, but he discovered it wasn't really sort of for him, and he had to bow out and move on after only about 6 weeks. And that's when Alice came in. So Alice we hadn't met before, but we said we were looking for a 5th person, and she applied, and we gladly took her on, and she helped us sort of build it in the first year. So this was a project that happened alongside full-time masters, full-time freelancing, and full-time internshipping. You'd have to come home from work that day or from university, and you'd be thinking about what you've learned, what you could write about that you think other people would find useful. Often we were up until sort of 1, 2 a.m. sort of tapping out just 500-600 words, but getting it ready to publish the next day. And it had all come about in August. So after Tom had sort of phoned me up and gone, I think this is what we should do, and Ben came up with a name. And all of a sudden we were like, okay, so we wrote out a brief, a project idea, and we asked a few people for advice. One of them was Martin Bellum, he's now at Trinity Mirror. He's doing those exciting projects with like Us Versus Them and Amped, which if you don't know about, you should definitely check out. And he emailed back and he went like, guys, this is great, it's ambitious, but don't wait around for anything, just go do it. So the next day we registered wannabehacks.wordpress.com, and we started publishing. And sort of one thing led to another, and now we're read by 15,000 people every month. We've got 9,000 Twitter followers. We've sent people on like free coding courses. We've sent them on sort of like freelancing workshops. We often get to send people to sort of conferences so they can hear people speak like this, but not ones that cost sort of thousands of pounds rather than free ones. And it's really led to a lot of opportunity, as well as arguably helping us all get our first jobs. So my first job was actually at The Guardian. It was working for their professional networks, which are sort of like their online business-to-business magazines. And that came about because they'd done a little piece on wannabe hacks in their media section. And about 2 weeks later, we got a DM on Twitter saying, oh, we're hiring in these roles. Is anybody interested? I applied and I got it. And so I started there sort of about 4 months after graduating. That led to a job at The Telegraph, which was sort of deputy social media editor there, working with Kate Day. And then through a sort of a beautiful twist of fate, with the way that Ben graduated, he started at The Guardian doing a similar thing to I had been doing. And then our old boss at the Times was looking for 2 people, one of whom Ben got recommended. So Ben was recommended, and then he recommended me. And so the two of us started within sort of 3 months of each other at the Times, working on all of their sort of social community and campaigning aspects. And then we had a little shift around again in October, and that's led me to do what I do now. But so Hacks is an example of a side project. And I've got this sort of a bit of a thing at the moment about the power of side projects. As I said at the beginning, you don't need permission from anyone to get started anymore. And a side project is a fantastic way to sort of mark yourself out as somebody that's interesting, somebody that is interested in the world, that has sort of a curiosity and is prepared to go and explore it and to do things with it. And there are lots of sort of brilliant examples of this. I don't know how many of you know about, there's a company in San Francisco called Uber, which have been sort of transforming the way cabs work all around the world. And that was a side project from the guys who used to run a little web extension called Stumble Upon, which you could click and it would randomly throw you onto web pages when you were bored. Good bit of university, that. So this massive business that's now being valued at sort of over $2 billion came out of them, the guys that started Stumble Upon, having a chat and developing this idea on the side. A friend that I was at nursery with many years ago has just moved his business, Mahogany, into new offices in Clerkenwell. This business started life as a music blog, him just sort of writing about the things that interested him. Now they do sort of live recording sessions and all sorts, and that was a side project. There's a guy I work with called Joseph Stashko, he works in my team for the Times Sunday Times digital team, and he is running a business on the side called LiveBlog Pro. And they went, do you know what, live blogging software isn't very good, we can do a better job. And there's 3 of them that run that. And the whole point was, he didn't wait for anyone to tell him he could, he just went and did it. And then there was a student in the States, this was a few years ago, called Gabby, who was having a terrible time after her degree trying to get sort of paid journalism work. And she said, like, I think I could do a much better job than a lot of stuff that's out there at the moment, but no one will give me a chance. So she started a Tumblr called 100 Interviews, and she had 100 ideas of people she could interview with interesting angles. And so she managed to get these people to agree to the interviews, and then she started publishing them. And this led to work with The Guardian, the New York Times, and her becoming sort of a fully established journalist. The point being that everybody just goes out and does this stuff. They don't wait for somebody to sort of put an opportunity in their lap. And you'll know when you've got the right idea. I was chatting with a few of my colleagues this morning on sort of on the chat system we use at work, and one of them was moaning about the budget coverage. And sort of saying, like, our budget coverage, everybody's budget coverage, essentially ignored young people yet again. It's almost sort of like this class of people in the UK don't exist. And there's no reason why a group of people couldn't sort of strike out and decide to do alternative budget coverage. You start a blog, start a website, and go and start doing it, and demonstrating that you've got a passion and an intelligence and a curiosity for an area that you think will have a readership. And as soon as you find readers, you'll find that there's more, that there's businesses to be built or communities to be built and opportunities to be had. We had no idea that Wannabe Hacks was sort of being put into this vacuum of sort of desperation of advice. And we'll post a CV up. We do CV workshops, so people send their CVs in, and we post a CV up, and we go, right, what's wrong with this? What would you change? And sort of 50, 60 people will dive into the comments. And sort of critique and say, it might be better if you swap this with this, or I wouldn't bother using that because I don't think it's as relevant to the career you're trying to get into, and things. And these people go away and they redo their CVs and they post them again for sort of feedback. And you go, I think that's about as good as it could be to get started. And so all of this sort of helps drive people towards getting jobs and getting their careers started. And you wouldn't have thought 4 years ago that there was such a desperate demand for it, but there clearly is. And so if you do have a little idea that just keeps popping up, usually the best way to think about it is a problem you can solve. So budget coverage isn't good for young people, or the coverage of sort of unsigned music in my city isn't very good, or whatever it may be. If it keeps popping up in your head time and time again, sort of like when you're in the shower, I have all my best ideas in the showers, and I've got to figure out a way to write it down, because by the time I get out, I've forgotten them all. But that's when you know it's worth coming back to, and it's worth sort of exploring further and having a go. Last week I was in Manchester talking to sort of people quite a bit younger. They were sort of 14, 15, 16 and looking to get into journalism. And these three guys came up to me and said, we're starting this music blog, this music magazine. Have you got any advice for us? And sort of over coffee for 25 minutes, I sort of talked them through like how we got started with Hacks and what we did there and what lessons they could take from it. And I said, like, get in touch if you've got more questions. And they tweeted me the other day, and hopefully I'll be able to give them a little bit of guidance and advice. But the point is, they're doing it. They're not afraid. They know that they might fail, but they'll learn along the way. And they may bring something fantastically new to Manchester's music sort of scene and its coverage. The point is, you don't know where these things are going to go, and that's never a good reason not to do it. So the side projects, they give you this opportunity to learn a lot of good things. I think they give you a thick skin. We really managed to piss some people off whilst we were doing Wannabe Hacks. Tom wrote a piece about Guardian work experience whilst he was there, saying how he'd much rather spend time on a local or a regional, because you're actually a part of what they do in those moments, whereas at the Guardian you're just window dressing. And he published this on the Thursday morning, and he still had a day and a half to go. And there was someone came, so he was on the sports desk, and he'd been in that morning, and he pitched a couple of ideas, and he was working away, and someone came and sat down next to him, and he said, "Oh, excuse me, Tom." And it's like, "Oh, yes." It's like, "I'm one of Alan's deputies." So didn't give their names. "I'm one of Alan's deputies. Are you involved in Wannabe Hacks?" And sort of like, "Yeah." It's like, "Oh, okay. It's just, I think you published something about the Guardian this morning." And they were upset that he'd published something, but the fact of the matter is he told the truth from his point of view. He stood by it. I don't think they actually asked us to take it down, but we've been asked to sort of take other things down because they've upset people. And it's always good to know that you're ruffling a few feathers and sort of challenging established sort of practices and ideas within the industry. But the point is, you can have an impact. Like this is the Guardian, one of sort of the behemoths of online publishing, but they still cared about what was being said on essentially what was a blog, sort of over in the corner. And it's just good to know that you can get under people's skin and you can make a difference, even from a sort of very humble beginning. It's also worth noting that you can get by on less sleep. You can always get by on less sleep. It's hard work, but like sort of as Sophie was saying, she hasn't had a day off in 2 years. And if you want to make something like this work, you do it around your day jobs, you do it around your other activities. We're writing posts at sort of 1, 2 in the morning. That's still how it happens now. The 5, 6 people that are like the writers for Hacks at the moment, I know their work doesn't get submitted till about 2 a.m. and then Natalie, who's editing, has to sub it at sort of like 7 o'clock in the morning before she goes to work, before we publish it. But the point is, we get by, you just have to be committed. It gives you an opportunity to sort of explore your passions and to develop your skills. It's a great opportunity for personal education. One of the things I think is really poor in newsrooms, and I've worked in 3 national newsrooms now, is that people don't take responsibility for teaching themselves. They sort of figure it's somebody else's responsibility. And then they wonder why, and I'm very cautious about generalizing here because I often think that it's about your mindset rather than your age. But I think that a lot of young people are coming in a lot hungrier than a lot of existing established journalists are, and they don't understand why they're so good at turning their hands to new things. And it's not because you're young, it's because you're open-minded, because you have to be. And there are plenty of older journalists who are open-minded, and they're the ones that really stand out, sort of in a modern digital newsroom. But the point is that that personal education, which you are responsible for, is a massive thing. And you should never stop learning over the entire course of your career. And it's up to you. No one's going to do it for you. Risks and mistakes. You can't make that many mistakes when you're publishing for the Times. It gets noticed, and there's a certain expectation that readers have, and that's sort of rightly so. But with your little thing that's over on the side, you can screw up. You can learn from your mistakes, and you get better because of it. And that's actually sort of to bring me around to what I'm doing at the moment. So I work for the only cross-title team, so the only team that works for both the Times and the Sunday Times. It's a small team, it's 23 people. 23 people. If you take away the 3 most senior members, so the head and deputy head of digital, Alan Hunter and Lucia Adams, and Pat Long, my boss, the average age of the team is 24. We've just hired a guy called Josh Boswell, who's 21. Sort of into a role called news producer, where he's sort of responsible for how we do quick turnaround digital projects in our iPad edition every day. So, he's working with the head of news, the head of home news, the editor, the deputy editor, on a daily basis to sort of make sure that what we're producing for our readers is as good as it can be. There's a huge amount of opportunity out there. And we're creating an environment where we're allowed to fail. Or at least we're allowed to take risks and learn new things. So we've got a project that will hopefully go live tomorrow that's only going to be 2 days old, as in it's only going to be taken 2 days to put together. It might not work, but we'll wait and see, and we'll take what we learn, and the next time we try and do it, we'll do it better. About a month ago, we ran what we called it Build the News. It's essentially a hack day, which is sort of a coding thing. It's where you give people a challenge to sort of see what ideas they can come up with in a confined space of time. It was 10 student teams, and then 1 from the Times and 1 from the Sunday Times competing to sort of concept these ideas and then build them. And that was something I bullied people for about 6 months until someone gave me the £15,000 that I think we needed to run it. It was essentially a side project at work, and it was unbelievably successful. It was presented back to the board, and now people are saying, when are you doing the next one? And I said, well, give me 20k and I'll go do it. But the point is, even once you are somewhere and you're established and you think you've got a career, as it were, you can take it further and you can do new things, and you can use the environment you're in to do the next thing. And so I think that's the sort of where I'm going to wrap up, is sort of people talk about challenges, but I like to talk about opportunities. I think there are problems to be solved. I think the way that communication has changed over the last 5 years is fascinating. And rather than seeing it as something to be overcome, I think it's something to be embraced. You're coming into a world where there's numerous types of jobs that never used to exist, and I'm sure that there will be newer jobs within another 2 or 3 years. And so you sort of have some imagination, but most importantly, have some get up and go. Yeah. Any questions? We'll go on. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So my first question would be, why do page-views? Why are they your main? Yeah. But always remember, it's better to have a small, committed audience that are very interested in what you write than to have a large fly-by-one that sort of come and go. Your loyalty is sort of massively underrated as a quality we should measure. And I mean, obviously, if you're trying to build your profile and to sort of be read by more people, then that's just a case of sort of being persistent and building contacts and building up your sort of social networks and things. But if it's about the success of the project, as it were, then I'd really encourage you to redefine how you measure success. So at the Times, we're paywalled. So we talk about total paid sales and things, but what we really care about is how long people spend with us. So on average, you spend 40 minutes reading the edition in the iPad each day, and on a Sunday, it's 90 minutes. And so obviously, people are aware of the numbers because they're the paying people, but we're far more bothered at the moment about how the people that are with us spend their time and how much of a relationship they have with us. And that's the same with hacks. Like I said, the numbers are nice in terms of the readership, but I'm much more interested in sort of knowing people, and it's great when someone says, hey, do you know someone who'd be good for this kind of job? And you can go, actually, yeah, there's this guy who's been guest posting for hacks, and he'd be really good. And that comes from building relationships rather than from going for volume. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In terms of the technology or the topic? Okay. So the technology, that's fairly straightforward. Go for WordPress. It's free. It's unbelievably easy to use. You don't need to overcomplicate it. You don't need some sort of flashy website. You just need something that will put up words when you click publish. And then you think about how you get it out there to people. So the way that Wannabe Hacks managed to get the little piece of coverage we got in The Guardian was we sent The Guardian had someone blogging for them about getting into journalism, but they were frankly abysmal. And we tweeted The Guardian's careers Twitter account, and we went, that person you've got blogging for you is awful, we're better. Have a chat with us, at which point they came back to us and said, okay, we will. And that's how we ended up with an interview, and we ended up with a piece in the Media Guardian. So yeah, be audacious. But yeah, technology-wise, I think WordPress is just sort of the simplest and easiest way to go, and it's free. Anybody else? Cool. Do feel free to sort of come and grab me afterwards. I know people don't like asking questions in front of people, but thanks very much and good luck.